Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for sticking around for our session around content. So I actually had the pleasure, thanks to PMA for inviting me back, of presenting last year, and we did a session around research-led brand development, and one of the questions that hit me at the end was, how can a business that doesn't have a big budget do what you've just presented to us? And so this year we've tried to make the presentation around the opposite end of the spectrum. How do you make your content efficient? How do you collect content efficiently so that even if you're the smallest business in the industry, this should help you think about how to push your content further. So a little bit about us. I'm the general manager of branding and comms at Freshmax. I've been with the business about 5 years, and Sona joined us about 18 months ago to manage all of our IP brand campaigns here in Australia. So between us, we bring quite a broad mix of B2B and FMCG campaigning experience. And so when we go through the session today, we're going to kind of pull on those different levers of experience to kind of shed some light on this area. First of all, I just want to get a bit of an idea around the room. Who here feels that their role actually involves marketing? That's a relief. That's good. And has anyone here been involved in building, launching, or campaigning brands year on year? Again, great. So people who this is, your bread and butter. So we're going to explore how content applies in the campaign spectrum today and the choices around who brings your content, sees your content, how they want to consume it, what it is that they want to consume, and really the whys of your choices in terms of building a content pipeline around those points. Just a little thing, there's a couple of moments through the presentation where we're time limited, and so what we've done is we've embedded a few QR codes that hopefully you can scan whilst you're sitting here, which will take you to other content to look at after the talk. So things around previous presentations, articles online, stuff like that. So iPhones, smartphones at the ready, and that should help you out. Briefly, before we go into it, just one thing that I mentioned last year, and the stats fascinate me, that only 0.5% of the workforce in Australia is actually in a pure marketing campaigning role. So that's a tiny amount of the population that is in charge of making sure consumers make all of their choices according to what's best for them or best for the business, selling stuff, sure. But in our line of work, we're trying to encourage consumers to engage with our creative thinking, engage with our outbound comms, solve problems for them, give them more information through provenance stories. But all of those things are driven by content. A mantra that stands the test of time, it was in the plenary sessions at last year's PMA, Hort Connections, and it was very much the message this morning, was that we must continue to innovate. We can't keep thinking that the way we've done content, the way we've done campaigns historically is enough for the future. So one of the things that we're always trying to do, and when Sona starts talking about the execution of using campaign in content in a campaign, is always try and open new doors and find ways of making content go that little bit further. So the agenda for the session, first of all, I'm just going to do a little bit of background defining the content landscape. Now, then I will touch on the art of capturing content. We're going to try and keep that to a minimum for today's session because I want us to focus more on how you put that into practice in executing a campaign. And then finally, I'm going to kind of talk through from a more kind of commercial leadership perspective how we strategize getting investment for that content building. Because as ever, it comes down to how much can you convince your employer to give you some money to spend. So, defining the landscape. Firstly, what is content marketing? Well, in essence, it's storytelling, but it's storytelling in a way that no matter who the person is, where they are, what their lifestyle choice is, what the time of day is, you're giving them the piece of content that helps them make a choice. It doesn't have to be the choice to buy. It can be the choice to go to the supermarket twice in the week. It can be the choice to think about their kids' health more that day, ask themselves some poignant questions. The art is that when you go from just telling a story, you have to break that story into all sorts of little micro touch points across a multi-channel approach, because only then can you truly influence a purchasing choice. I'm not going to go into that anymore right now, because otherwise I'll be stealing thunder for the rest of the presentation. But the more touch points you can get, the more well thought out they are, the more effective your content is being used. So where does content come from? Who's it for? Like, these are the kind of questions that you have to always be asking. And we generally break our content audience and contribution model into three factions. The internal content, the supply chain content, and the consumer content. So not only can you get content from these people, or not only are you building content for these people, so how does your innovation content help the supply chain? How does your grower stories content spread across the retailers and out into consumers and then back to your breeders or your investors. But also, you've got to recognize that those same people are driving your content. So effectively, what that means is that your content is for everyone, from everyone, by everyone. Every moment that you have a touch point that could generate content, there is a possibility to make that content usable for any number of audiences. So when you're capturing it, as you'll see in a moment, you have to capture it in a way that you're thinking about that biggest possible picture. I think that the critical thing is that content capturing is a constant. It's not like you build a brand and then you take it to market and you're hoping that you've put the due diligence into that brand that it will stand the test of time. Sure, you build tactical elements each year, but the brand itself, its essence, should stand the test of time. Content is always changing. A photo that you took last year might not be of value next year because people have seen it too much. You need to have shoots scheduled, have content building opportunities every year. So that pipeline is something that you're always going to be investing in, always going to be refining, always going to be exploring new and different ways to build. So there's an article that has gone into Produce Plus that is in the welcome packs that you got this conference called Capturing Content Effectively. A bit of self-promotion, it's written by yours truly. But look, the essence of that article is it's a bit of just a storytelling of the journey through going up into far north Queensland and capturing video and photo and interview content with growers who really have never had a camera stuck in front of their face before. And so how do you put them at ease? How do you see all the different opportunities? How do you capture the content that you didn't even realize you wanted and then afterwards find out that it's one of the most powerful pieces of footage you've ever seen? You know, a guy twice my size laughing his head off right in front of his plants. That joy, that sense of pride of ownership is very difficult to fake on camera. So the better you get at exploring content capturing, the more you're likely to unearth those little gems. So we've talked about the fact that it comes from everywhere and it can be kind of sent in lots of different directions. There's lots of different types of content. Generally, people are very comfortable with the idea that taking a photo of a piece of fruit is a good stock photo for you to provide to retailers, to put into presentations, to maybe put on a poster or a point-of-sale material here or there. But you've also got all of those elements that sit in behind social media, that sit in behind a more digitized engagement with mainstream media, such as interview sections, audio clips, stuff that you can blend into podcasts. When you talk about the current generation that's coming through and their expectations around content, they want to be able to choose what it is that they read about. They don't want you to say, this is the piece of advertising. They want to be able to go to your social media channel and browse through the last 4 months' worth of content at their leisure. They're not going to look at it all, but they're going to go, you know what, I don't want to know what you're pushing at me right now. I'm going to dig, and listen to the story about someone's grandmother and how she started the orchard 20 years ago that you filmed in the off-season. You know, they're looking to be able to self-define their content consumption. So you have to make sure that you've built a broad enough range of content that they can do that. The other thing is that, as I mentioned before, building of content is constant. You know, timing is a moving target, though. And by that, what I mean, that one of the biggest lessons that kind of I learned when I first came into produce 5 years ago was that you cannot afford to wait for a product to be ready to go to market to be capturing content. As an example, really what that means is the first ever promotional shots that you take of a product have to have been from last season. They can't be this year. Because if you think about it and you go, okay, so we're going to go out and get harvest footage of this product. Yeah, but by the time they've edited it and produced it and given it back to you and you've amended it and they've given it back to you and you're finally ready to share it with the retailer who then has to approve it before you and edit it again, the season's already halfway through. So you have to be thinking about producing content early, particularly when it comes to the basics. So, you know, getting those stock photos, getting those orchard shots, maybe getting a drone up over a couple of your growers' properties, those kind of core elements need to be done at least 1 season ahead of time to make sure that you can play around with them ahead of needing to roll them out into the market and into a campaign. The other thing, as I said before, is that the pipeline is constant. You always need to refresh. I suppose the one thing that is a real efficiency driver when it comes to strategy is if you plan your content strategy properly, the amount that you have to refresh each year is a fraction of what you would invest in any one season in your marketing overall. Because actually, you're only refreshing these 3 or 4 recipes this year, and those stock photos next year, and this little bit of footage the year after. You're not trying to do it all at once. So if you strategize it carefully and you stagger how you're building the content, the refresh rate is quite cost effective.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Matt. As I mentioned in this previous slides, creation of powerful content is extremely important. Can you all hear me? No. Okay. So creation of powerful content is extremely important, and it has to be a continuous process. I'm sure most of you have seen or used one of the taglines by Mary Smith in the previously. If content is king, engagement is queen. What does this generally mean is the king is served by the queen in his house, or in my context, I'm married, so happy wife, happy life. But if you put this logic into marketing, it also means that as a marketer, you are open to loads of diverse range of content. You have images, you have videos, footages, social media testimonials. You've got merchandising images, which you can use it at any platform. You can either post it on Facebook, use it on all the above the line, below the line promotions, and tell the world, we're a rock star. Or you can create and curate content exclusively for your target audience and lead them to believe that you are a superstar. So most of the marketers would like the second to happen. So how do we do that? We create and post resonating content that educate, motivate, and connect with the consumers so that they try our brand and they trust our brand. The idea when I do a campaign is quite simple. I believe in a strong content marketing strategy focusing on consumers. As Matt mentioned in his slide, the source of content can be from various places. I am going to talk about consumers, and I am of the strong belief that if you build it, they will follow. Most of my campaigns are brand awareness orientated or market penetration orientated. So that's the reason most of my content is also B2C. But what I try to do is, when I create content for B2C, I tap into those content and create something interesting for B2B. So recently, last year, we did an experiential activation for our flagship Apple brand called Modi Apples. We did a blind taste test at Westfield Bondi Junction, Sydney. We blindfolded the consumers and asked them to pick the crunchiest, juiciest apple available in front of them, out of which Modi was also one among them. And we had a survey feedback form where the consumers talked about what they liked about the brand, what are the distinct features that actually stood out, and why would they purchase in the future. General marketing stuff. But when I moved from Melbourne to Sydney for the activation, I also took a freelance photographer with me at a fraction of the cost as a normal actual videographer would take, and asked him to shoot the entire activation. So when I came back to Melbourne, I had this amazing piece of content available. I had images, I had videos, I had interviews of the adults, I had kids enjoying the fruit and playing the tunes of it, which is fantastic. I knew that I could use that on Facebook, I can use that on social media ads. But what I also did is, with the same content, I created a press release for the trade press. I created an article about this activation as to how it is groundbreaking, why it is different, and why we need to include more experiential activations for our brands. So B2C, B2B. The next concept is probably most fundamental and pivotal element of the FMCG marketing I've been doing the past few years, path to purchase. Most brands fail to understand the path through which the consumers develop, learn, experience, or even purchase their product. Most marketers who have got very high marketing budgets or operating in a near vacuum often compensate for this by spraying all their efforts into one single output. Generally, a buckshot marketing strategy might work, but it's not really feasible for fresh produce brands. Path to purchase helps us to explore the journey the consumer takes towards decision making. understanding what are the touch points in the consumer's decision-making journey where we can influence them. I'll talk about this in the future, in the coming slides, but what I need to inform you in this context is what is extremely important, even if you're doing a path to purchase, is you need to know your target audience really well. So to understand your target audience, you need to do a profiling. Segmentation has existed with marketing. Ever since marketing has been coined, segmentation has been a part of it. We all know about demographic segmentation, segmentation based on age or income, but it is relevant, but it's quite historic. One of the reasons why I don't prefer demographic segmentation is because there are too many crossovers between the age group of 18 to 25 and 25 to 30. The interests are almost very similar that it makes extremely difficult for a marketer like me to create something innovative and unique for those target audience. I focused on the behavioral segmentation. I profiled the consumers into 4 different types, which were brand conscious, health conscious, impulsive buyers, and price sensitive. So these are based on the behavioral attributes of the consumers rather than their age or income. So once I've done this profiling, my next step was, how do I create exclusive content for these consumer base? We did a different activation for Modi last year again called the Tip-On recipe book, which is more like the content that we had in our library from last year's campaign from all the celebrity brand ambassadors like Karen Martini, Donna DeFrancesco, who had this amazing set of recipes created for us 2 years before. I used those recipes. I requested for more recipes this year from the influencers. I got recipes from the growers. Some of the nutritionists were happy to give me just the recipes if I gave them credits in the recipe book. So I collated all these recipes and created a tip-on recipe book, which was then sent to all the consumers within a magazine called Eat Well magazine, which is available in the market for them to purchase. So as a brand-conscious consumer, wow, there are 16 recipes that I can make with this product. I'm going to try it out. This product is so versatile. So for a health-conscious consumer, oh man, this recipe is vegan, or this is gluten-free, or this has got recipes with buckwheat flour. I'm going to give it a go. With one piece of content, I could appease my 2 main target audience, which is brand conscious and health conscious. Now that was a bonus for me, but whereas I was thinking of creating exclusive content for each of these consumer base, I could get away with one of those content. But I have 2 more consumer base that I had to focus on, which was price sensitive and impulsive buyers. For price sensitive, I had to focus on the consumers who would spend less on their daily budget. So creating an article such as how to cook a recipe or cook a few recipes under $20 for a household of 4 would really fascinate them. For impulsive buyers, they are conscious about the price, but they're also aware that if there is less time and if it's going to cost them less effort, they'll give it a go. So for those consumers, we looked at cooks articles. How can you cook something under 25 minutes? So these are some kind of examples how we targeted these target consumers. I have done my consumer profiling. I have already created so many content exclusive to my target audience. The next step is path to purchase. As I mentioned earlier, the consumer's decision-making journey go through a life cycle of different stages. Thinking to buy, narrowing down the options, considering to buy, and finally buying the product. So as a marketer, how do I make sure I have got content at each of these touch points which correlates with the same message? Across all the 4 consumer profiles, we identified 5 different occasions: home, commute, work, shopping, and entertainment. The next step was to identify the vehicle with which I can propagate this content to those consumers. So with home and commute, what I used was consumer presence social media, which was more about educating the consumers about why this product is different, why should you try it. And social media had a lot of fun posts about where is this grown from, where is this variety from. And commute, we use transit media, billboards, and radio. Information about the product focused more about brand awareness, but the kind of messaging that we used at different paths to purchase was exclusively different. Work focused on social media, consumer press, tribe influencer campaign, and in shopping, which is one of the most important step for us because a lot of people purchase their product when they are at the shopping center. So we had proximity advertisement, which is more like shop alive panels placed probably 100 meters next to your stores, Kohl's or Woolworths. We have flybys as a sales acceleration activity. We had point of sales, and we did in-store sampling and other activations. Now, in entertainment, we do a lot of events. We do Run for the Kids, we do kidney health events, we do prostate cancer. So those kind of events really helps to connect with the audience and engage with the brand. We did a celebrity endorsement with a #1 recipe or the blogger in Australia called Recipe Tin Eats, where we created a recipe with Modi apples and got 3.6 million views in 3 days. And we also constantly use social media for this. So once this is done, we execute it step by step. This is mainly for maintaining my sanity, because when you have campaign for 9 months or 12 months, it is very easy to lose it. And so I focus on phase 1 launch, which is brand awareness, phase 2 on education and engagement, and phase 3, season tail, focus on brand recall and sales acceleration. Content in, content out. Whatever we drives requires content, and whatever we need to produce also requires content. These are some of the content that we have generated in the past and which can be reproduced to create something as a content out. I would also like to throw you light on a recent activation we did for Modi campaign this year, which included a Good Food and Wine show stand, where we not only created an in-store sampling atmosphere, but also created an exclusive competition for adults and kids. We had kids coloring in at the event, and we also had the adults scanning the QR code and understanding more about the brand and giving their feedback. So out of 30,000 people who came for the event, we had 8,000 people scanning the QR code to enter into the competition, which is fantastic activation for us in terms of a brand. So this is how you can actively plan your campaign around content. Sorry, I had to rush through in the back because we had limited time available. Thank you.
Guys, I got 2 more minutes, is that okay? Okay, I'm going to fly through this last section really quickly. We're very short on time, but critically, just for you to know, that QR code I've just skipped straight past, that's for the talk that I did last year. It's all about investing in brands. Worth a look if you're kind of working out how to convince stakeholders about the value of marketing. But in terms of content investment, as I said back at the beginning, it's all about efficiency, benchmarking, and results. So efficiency insofar as how far can I push this piece of content? How many different ways can I use this one clip? Can it be a blooper? Can it be an interview? Can it be a montage? Can it be multi-category? Can it be for B2C and B2B? Can it be for social media? Can it be for TV? Can it be for radio? All the different types of ways that content can form a part of your campaign. In terms of benchmarking, the better that you can convince your businesses that there are these core assets that you have to build first, and then everything else is year on year, the better you'll be able to get sign-off for that core asset piece first, get it done, and then start to talk to the business about investing each season in new and different types of content. And then, of course, the best thing when it comes to investment and marketing is that businesses are not used to marketing being able to tell them what a result looks like. It's very easy to get into the habit of vanity matrix where you talk about the number of likes on your Facebook page, but if you can talk about a specific piece of content, the amount of engagement that it drove, in a channel or on a social media platform or through a blog, suddenly there's really meaningful data behind what content is working. In terms of an investment scale, really, really briefly, all I'm really indicating here is the fact that your content investment deteriorates over time because the proportional cost of what you invest each year in content will go down in comparison to everything else that you're investing as a campaign comes around. And what I mean by that is a good example of what Sona was saying about the Good Food and Wine show. You build content from that, but it's not a content investment. You're there as an activation, as an event, as a sponsorship. That's a different piece of marketing investment, and yet it's building you great content. So over time, your best content becomes incidental rather than a direct investment. Thank you very much.